Hello and welcome to this 8th in my series of CPD Coffee Time sessions. Today we're going to focus on building self-esteem and a growth mindset. And hopefully this session will be useful. Do please take some time to reflect as I go through. You can come back and watch this session again if you want to. Obviously it's out there now, it's going to be out there on YouTube, and I'm really keen that people can use these sessions in a really flexible way. And they are not just intended for teachers in schools, they're intended for all of us who nurture children and young people. So parents, carers, foster carers, social workers who are working with looked after children, etc. So I'm hoping that this will be, particularly this session, something that many of you will find useful when you are nurturing our children. So I'm sure some of you will know of me from my publications. I have written extensively for Nurture UK. I'm very proud of my long association with the charity. So I will be making some reference to some of their resources in the sense that I'm using some of the key tools that are presented, particularly in their 60 minutes boxes. So do have a look at those, particularly the positive minutes one. And of course, I'm also going to be making reference specifically to the Essential Resilience and Wellbeing Toolkit from Hinton House Publishers. I've had a long association with the wonderful Sarah Miles, and many of the ideas and key tools and strategies I'm going to present today in terms of building self-esteem and a growth mindset are presented in that publication. So hopefully this will be useful to you and something that you can take away and share with others. So in this session, I'm going to attempt to define the concepts of self-esteem, self-concept, the ideal self and global self-esteem, and present what I feel is a controversy around this whole area, highlighting the dangers of feel-good self-esteem. I want to present you with what I call the resiliency route to authentic self-esteem, and then subsequently share some of Carol Dweck's research on growth mindset. Hopefully this session will give you some time to reflect and discuss with colleagues if you're doing it as a small group, and I know many people have been doing that with previous sessions that I presented on YouTube. So it's an opportunity to think about your teaching, think about the way in which you nurture the children and young people and how you can foster that growth mindset, and also encourage the development of self-esteem that is authentic for our children and young people. So where do we get our self-esteem from? Generally, for most of us, this will come from parental messages and cultural, societal messages that we receive. So if I was doing this in the flesh with you, we'd spend some time now thinking about our own self-esteem and where it comes from and where we received the messages that actually nurtured or did the opposite in terms of building self-esteem. Healthy messages that we would have received as children would have promoted really a really sense of self-awareness and self-esteem that was generally good, healthy. And the messages would have been around, actually, it's okay to make mistakes. We always love you anyway. It doesn't matter what you do or say. That love is unconditional. And children who've received unconditional positive regard from adults, we know this, develop overall better self-esteem. It's natural to do that. Unhealthy parents would use weapons such as isolation, ridicule, and ridicule and shame is really quite powerful, and the damage can be long term, particularly when it's part of an overall abusive relationship. So invalidation of the child and shaming them in order to try and get them to obey, and withdrawing their love until they do obey. So that kind of negative, really dysfunctional parenting is clearly going to have a negative impact on the outcomes mental health wise and in terms of obviously self-esteem for any child. So the 7 parental circumstances that cause this low level of self-esteem: the parental rejection, those messages, you were an accident, it's your fault, you make me drink, this is why I'm behaving like this. And this is the parent generally who's neglectful and self-obsessed. It's all about them as opposed to the child. So of course the child will feel neglected. Also, there is this parental overindulgence, so the spoiling of the child, that can cause low self-esteem. Because in essence, the child who gets everything grows up unable to achieve goals or discipline themselves. They don't actually take responsibility for their own actions, and they feel almost as if it's owed to them to actually be nurtured in this way, to that overindulgent extent all the time. Parental overprotectiveness, again, this can come from very, very good intentions, people who really love their children and worried about them failing or being hurt or upset. But this kind of cotton wooling ultimately doesn't build resilience and just creates children who feel insecure and lack the self-confidence to succeed or take risks and judge what a good risk is to take. Overly critical parents also damage self-esteem, and we know this as these are the adults who always feel guilty or not good enough, and ultimately this can cause anxiety disorders and depression in our children and young people. That level of criticism on a daily basis obviously is going to have that kind of negative impact, as would parental abuse, clearly physical, verbal or sexual abuse. And ultimately this engenders feelings of total inadequacy in a child and a real lack of ability to become intimate or build positive, nurturing, successful connections with others. And also clearly parental alcoholism or drug abuse, that kind of chaotic upbringing in which children ultimately will deny their own feelings, letting others walk all over them. A major childhood loss, again, we know this, a death of a parent or a divorce, which feels ultimately like a bereavement to many of our children, can create real sense of abandonment, and children become really, really overwhelmed by this and fear future losses. And this can lead, unfortunately, to overdependency on other people, individuals, obsessive behaviours around that, but also substance abuse and addictive behaviours in general. And also those key cultural, societal messages that we all receive where our cultural heritage is not affirmed. We're told not to be different. We don't want to be separate. We need to follow the so-called perceived norms. You're not like that. There's something wrong with you. You're flawed. You're inferior. You're an animal. There's something wrong with you. You don't fit. Clearly the media in general, the things that we watch, that we absorb through television, magazines, the internet, social networking, etc., particularly in the last 20 or so years, social networking has increased enormously in terms of actually being something that children access on a daily basis for many long extended periods actually. And these can polarize and distort or invalidate children, and particularly those who are perceived to be somewhat different from the norm, if you're in a minority of any sort, into believing that they are inferior. And of course, we've also got these 4 stress subpersonalities. So we're thinking about nature nurture here. So we've looked here at what the parental perceptions of the child will do in terms of informing their self-esteem or development of overall confidence and self-esteem. But also we need to actually just engage slightly in this nature nurture debate here, thinking about what it is within child factors and what it is in terms of personality that we bring to the table here. So some of us are worriers. So these are the people, the children and adults, who create mental worst case scenarios. And they'll overestimate the odds. Or the perfectionist, they believe that their efforts are never really good enough and they should always be working harder, trying harder, trying to achieve more. The critic, someone who's constantly negative judging themselves and maximising their weaknesses, minimising their strengths, so that the catastrophizer basically here, if you think back to our first session on cognitive behaviour therapy. And the critic as well, these are the kids, but also the adults I always feel the most sorry for, because I always know that when someone is really negatively judging other people and is very overcritical of them, it's usually because they are critical of themselves too. So very, very unhappy place to be. And then, of course, the victim. They feel helpless and hopeless, defective. So they'll use statements, or you'll hear the child saying things like, I can't, or I'll never be able to do this, I'll never be as good as, I can never manage this. And what I would want us to do here is really trying to engage, notwithstanding what kind of stress subpersonality the child may have. We need to gently ask these questions for all of them. What is the evidence? What's the evidence for these worries, for this view that you're taking, for this judgment that you've made of yourself? Is it always true? What are the facts? What is the bigger picture? What's the helicopter view here? Think again back to the CBT session. So again, it's about trying to support the child or young person to really critically appraise their thinking. What we think is not always a fact, and we need to be able to support them in challenging this so that they can engage with actually moving out of that negative cycle of thinking, feeling, behaving again. So actually just saying what's the real truth here? Is this actually accurate? Is it always true? So why is self-esteem so important? We know it's important because it actually ultimately enables us to learn well, particularly for our children and young people. We want them to be able to learn well with a combination of what Roberts calls high expectations and appropriately high self-esteem. Don't forget that we can have too much self-esteem. There is an issue here around people, young people and children and adults alike, whose self-esteem is too high, because actually what they don't do is self-reflect and realise that they need to move forward or change things or adapt, or that they get something wrong. And it's important that we understand that. So we need to break the cycle, what I call the negative learning cycle. So the child will be saying, I worry about failing, I'll not succeed, I won't be able to do it, so therefore I won't bother trying, it's not worth it. So in essence what this is going into this cycle of learned helplessness, Martin Seligman calls it. So the strategy that the child would use is not to bother or not to try, because actually they want to protect possibly that little level of self-esteem that they currently have, and that's a way of doing it. So it's really being caught in this negative learning cycle. It is a tricky one though here, because the relationship between academic achievements and self-esteem can be relatively confusing. So we can find ourselves asking, does good self-esteem actually raise achievement, or does achievement raise good self-esteem? And it's a chicken and egg problem here. So does good self-esteem raise achievement, or does achievement raise self-esteem? And I'm going to make the argument here that I think achievement can and does raise self-esteem, and vice versa. So it is quite complicated, so bear with me here. What we do know for a fact is that children who believe in their abilities tend to achieve more. There's a lot of research evidence for this, so almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think this is quite pertinent, really. I was told as a child that I wasn't particularly bright, clever, etc., etc. I had lots of negative messages from certain areas and quarters. But it was interesting that when I was told that I hadn't passed the 11 plus, this is so, yeah, it's quite personal, but I can share this, I think, in this session. I was told that I hadn't passed the 11 plus, and we were the last year in Oxfordshire to take it, so you can see how old I am now. I wasn't told until I was driving with my father to university, and he said, you know, you didn't realise that you hadn't passed. But you really, you know, you shouldn't really be going to uni because you're not really that bright. I don't understand how you managed to get this far. And I'm thinking, well, actually, I got my O-levels, A-levels, etc., Dad. So how did that happen? Well, apparently, Mr. Wonderful Tritton, our year 6 teacher, as then was, actually fiddled the results. And I think I've told this story before, but it's really interesting. He wanted all the kids from the council estate to go to university, to go to grammar school, to be successful. He had a passion for education, and he firmly believed that if you told kids that they were good, they were clever, they were wonderful, then actually that's what you would get back, and they'd work really hard and they'd feel successful and they'd try really hard and they'd take some risks, etc. So actually I didn't actually believe that I wasn't able to do things, because I wasn't told that I wasn't able to do things. In fact, I was told the reverse. So I believed that I could do stuff. So therefore I did end up being able to achieve a certain amount. At this point in the presentation, I'm going to look at these key terms, those of self-concept, ideal self, self-esteem, and global self-esteem. The reason why I'm doing this is because clearly they're all slightly different here. So self-concept will be the perception the child has of himself and how he defines himself. So I'm a boy, I'm Arthur's best friend, I like playing football, I like Big Macs. My self-concept, okay, so mine would be I'm a woman, I'm loyal, I like writing and going to the gym. In fact, I love both of them, but I can't go to the gym at the moment. Clearly, we're in this COVID pandemic. And I also love good wine and malt whisky. So these are all the individual components that make up the individual person. And in this instance, these are the components that make up me. So your ideal self, this is the self that we would really like to be. And usually there's some comparison to others that we're making here, but this is who I would really want to be in my life. So for lots of young people, they would want to be popular, they'd want to be successful, they'd want to, and this is an instance, it's a girl talking here. I'd like to have a boyfriend, I'd like to have curly hair, I'd want to be pretty and fit. It goes on and on. So self-esteem, in essence, is the evaluation of those parts. So if we give the example, how much do I value being Arthur's friend? How important is having a boyfriend? So it's the evaluation of those parts. Global self-esteem essentially is the overall state of feeling that we have towards ourselves. So there'll be specific areas where we feel good about ourselves and others not so positive, and that's normal. Self-esteem varies from day to day. Self-esteem varies in different areas. I'm much more confident in certain areas in doing certain things than I am in others. I have less self-esteem in other areas. That's quite normal. Many causes of low self-esteem, including this distorted self-evaluation. So some of us can be driven by this perfectionist nature, trying to achieve all the time and needing to be perfect. And this is really clearly linked to lower levels of self-esteem. It's distorted self-evaluation. Teasing and bullying by peers has a huge impact on the development of a healthy sense of identity, and we know this. And very often, if we're looking at some of the research, I've been doing this recently because I'm going to do a session on bullying as well in this series, but looking at the research evidence, and there's a huge amount of research around children who were bullied in their early years and in their teenage years, and then subsequent development of anxiety and depression. So that needs never to be underestimated. Attachment difficulties also clearly lead to an inferiority complex for many of our children, and a poor ability to communicate. So speech and language difficulties, never underestimate this, particularly in the early years, limit the success of that child's social interactions. And social interactions, we get so much affirmation from our peer group that this can make the child feel very, very isolated. Experiencing low levels of self-esteem at some point is absolutely normal. We mustn't over pathologize here. We know that it's normal. And the lovely Dr. Rob Long said, it's not a problem if we have this reservoir of good feelings towards ourselves in order to help heal ourselves. And I think that's such a lovely, lovely quote, and really, really important to remember this. And this is why we need to build this up in our children and young people, because sometimes we will get the bad days. Sometimes we won't feel as good about ourselves, and it's fine if we've got that bank, that little bank of resilience and good feelings about ourselves. So I'm going to present you this controversy now around what I call the feel-good self-esteem movement. And here's the first argument, that self-esteem is being depersonalized. Your low self-esteem has nothing to do with you. Okay, it's everyone else's fault that you're feeling this way. So in essence, you are a depersonalized victim. And at this point in the presentation, if you're doing this on your own or you're working with a group, you might just want to stop and pause and just have a go at this activity. So I think it's important to begin to reflect on where our self-esteem comes from, what messages we may have heard. So think about what maybe your parents or carers said. What messages did they give to you? I have double fold here. I have messages where I was told I wasn't particularly bright, I wasn't as clever as my sister, and I have other messages where I was told I was wonderful, and I received some marvellous unconditional regard and love. But what did your peers say as well? So thinking about what people said about you, the messages that you remember, maybe a sibling, and maybe the messages that you have told yourself over time. And just think about what those messages did in terms of impacting on your levels of confidence and self-esteem. It's a really useful activity just to stop and think and reflect. The problem with this argument around the messages that we have been given and the fact that they are so directly linked to our self-esteem is that it is actually quite flawed in its logic, because what it's doing is it's shifting the blame away from ourselves for our low levels of self-esteem. So what it's saying is, it's not my fault, I'm just helpless here, I've got this low level of self-esteem because everyone else told me how awful I was as a child. Okay, so in simplistic terms. What most of the research is telling us now, of course, is that we need to take some responsibility for our actions, and we need to move away from this cycle of learned helplessness. And in essence, what we have to do is allow our self-esteem to rise when actions display some merit. So it's what we do, the good that we do, the work that we do, how well we do it. So our self-esteem is actually the outcome of what we do, and always influenced by the choices we make for ourselves. So this is about taking personal responsibility. And obviously it's directly linked to resilience, because clearly if you have a bank of resilience, you are more able to take personal responsibility for your actions. But all of us need to develop this more, and children and young people need to be taught about the link between higher levels of self-esteem and the good things, the actions that they do that display some merit. The implication here, of course, is that we can all make the choice, we can all take responsibility. And what we need to be able to do is allow our children to do likewise. Okay, we have to give them this gift, it's absolutely vital. Argument 2 here, making yourself or others feel special by using methods such as looking in the mirror and saying, I'm somebody, I'm wonderful, I'm beautiful, I'm marvellous, actually doesn't do any good. I've been guilty of this in the past, trying to use affirmations in the wrong way, because actually you walk away and you still don't believe it, unless you're actually engaging or using affirmations in conjunction with cognitive behaviour therapy approaches. And in essence, this can do harm ultimately, because it may not be true. What Rosamond said in 2002 was that this type of self-esteem building produces what she called counterfeit positive self-assessment. And what it does is sets us up for disappointment in the real world, because we're developing this unrealistic picture of our specialness, and it really is not helpful to us. My argument then is that we need to develop what Nan Henderson identified as the resiliency route to authentic self-esteem, and this is not the stuff of meaningless affirmations. What this is based on is recognising actual accomplishments, the things that we've done that we're proud of, that we've done well, and identifying and understanding how we have and can make use of our strengths. And I'm going to do a lot more on recognising our strengths when I do the session on positive psychology approaches later in this series, so look out for that one. And also it's based on living a life where we express our talents and gifts. So we really make the most of them, we work hard at them, and we show the world what we can do, and we do it with a sense of self-confidence that is totally authentic. This route regards us as being capable of a shift in thinking, in essence, and it's solution focused. So it's about appreciating how and why we've done as well as we've done. And again, this is authentic because we're looking realistically at our achievements and drawing on that innate capacity for overcoming adversity and bouncing back, i.e. resilience, our resilience. Okay, so it's a shift in thinking here. At this point in the presentation, again, take some time to engage in this activity. Just stop the slideshow and have a go at thinking through this, okay? Identifying how I've done as well as I've done. What is it? And this is quite hard for some of us. It's harder if you are feeling nervous or a bit worried about sharing the things that you've done, or you've been told as a child many, many times that self-praise is no praise. Actually, recognising genuine accomplishments is absolutely vital for our well-being. Also, what are the 2 or 3 biggest challenges, including crises or traumas, that I've overcome? Because we have all overcome difficulties, challenges. I've overcome certain things in my life that I know were very, very difficult for me. And what did I draw on in order to do that? What did I use to overcome them? And what do I use every day to effectively cope with the typical stresses in my life, because there will be strengths and strategies that I'm using that allow me to do that. And this is quite a powerful activity in terms of really helping you to focus on and recognise very real achievements that you've accomplished. And this is also pertinent for our children. We need to move away from this so-called fluffy stuff. So giving ourselves credit for what we've really overcome and naming those accomplishments is not about inauthentic self-praise. It's actually being totally solution focused. And also I'm going to be doing a session on solution focused strategies and tools in one of the later sessions in the series, which I hope you will really find useful, particularly in this area of self-esteem. Focusing on how we've done as well as what we've done, identifying strengths, the lessons that we've learned, our virtues, talents, skills and capabilities in a really honest way. And this allows us to see where we can actually maximise those strengths, but also use them in other situations that we might find difficult or problematic. And I know that children need this more than ever at this current point in time, because many of them are going to be coming back into school now during this COVID pandemic and will maybe possibly feeling much more insecure, much less confident, and their self-esteem may have been dented somewhat. So I think this is really, really important at this point in time. So two ways that we can identify how we've done as well as we've done and what strengths we're using. We can identify what our personal resiliency builders are, and this is really, really important because we then can use those resiliency builders again in the future in other situations, as I said previously. But also looking at our personal lifelines is really powerful, looking at where we've come from and where we're going to and what we've overcome on that journey. So in the session on positive psychology, we're going to undertake a resilience snake activity, which I think you'll find quite useful. So individual qualities that facilitate resiliency, or what I call resilience builders, these are our relationships, our ability to engage in those and be connected, a sense of humour. Obviously for me this is something I use on a daily basis, possibly not always appropriately, but I do, and it does certainly get me through lots of situations where I'm feeling slightly overwhelmed. Inner direction, perceptiveness, that ability to understand what's going on underneath, independence, and a positive view of my personal future. Resiliency builders also include the ability to be flexible, a love of learning, a love of really wanting to inquire and learn new things, self-motivation, that inner motivation, competence, feeling competent at something, a sense of self-worth, spirituality comes in here, as does perseverance, showing true grit, and also creativity. Creativity definitely fosters resiliency and is a resiliency builder for many of us. So we need to build and use these skills with our children, and it might well be useful to make up a checklist of those resiliency builders and just think about individual children that you're working with or concerned about, and look at those areas and think about the ones that maybe need to be worked on further with them. Also, I think we need to use motivational, solution-focused and CBT approaches in order to support changes in thinking and help to engage with children so that they can challenge their own negative automatic thinking and patterns of behaviour. So building a sense of responsibility for that child within the child and a positive sense of self and self-esteem. So this is something that is a work in progress, but using all of these key tools and strategies are actually essential, particularly at this time. Here, the key message is ultimately that we need to move away from this simple feel-good self-esteem to authentic self-esteem, which involves choices and responsibilities. Okay, so authentic self-esteem based upon what I do and how well I try to do it, my achievements and the choices and responsibilities that I take and make. We mustn't reject what I call the old chestnuts here, and it just has to be kept authentic. Okay, the kind of praise that we're giving to kids as inauthentic is not helpful sometimes, and I'm going to go on to talk about this in the next few slides as we go into the area of growth mindset. What we need to do is make sure that we value attempts. We engage with children so that we give them the helper roles, we start to build their self-esteem in that way, and we allow them choices, a sense of autonomy. We also engage with them so that they can record successes in an effective way. 3 good things, 3 positive things I've done. This is something wonderful, having that lovely book that we can put together where we collate all of the successes over time. We need to encourage children to stop comparing themselves to others, particularly in the realm of social media. Also teaching the skills of emotional literacy, and we've had a session on that, so I'm hoping that you were able to access that, and modelling and teaching those skills from cognitive behaviour therapy to challenge ineffective thinking. And again, the first session in the series was focusing on those specific skills, promoting personal resiliency builders and ultimately positive relationships, and building the growth mindsets that children need in order to develop simultaneously positive, useful, helpful levels of self-esteem. So a question for you to consider at this point in time: are people born smart? If you're working with colleagues, just pause the presentation and have a chat now. Think about this. Are people born smart? What do you think? And think about some role models here. And actually what was said about Einstein, Michael Jordan, etc. Think about this, because actually people were given very, very different messages, and yet they went on to become extremely successful in their fields. People are made, not born. In essence, this is growth mindset. So I've always thought this to be the case, and I've known it personally from personal experience. I know that actually IQ, like EQ, does not have to be fixed. We can grow our brains. We can actually develop academically, cognitively. We can actually achieve more, and particularly when we adopt this growth mindset and we accept the fact that we can actually develop our skills, we can develop our capacities to learn, as long as we maintain and also develop this growth mindset. The next slides really do develop this now, and we're going to look at Carol Dweck's self-theories, and I think really helpful to make reference to her hugely successful publication here. She's been doing research for over 35 years now with children and young adults, and is really interested in how they view themselves as learners. And what she says is that their self-theory is likely to have a major effect on their self-belief, motivation to learn, and their levels of resilience. It is a very simple but profound theory, and many of you will know of this, so I just feel it's really useful at this point in time to revisit it if you've actually done some work on this before, which I know many people, particularly in early years and primary, have. But I think it's really important, particularly as our children are coming back into school after lockdown, and we know that many of them will be finding it very difficult to once again engage academically. With a fixed mindset, people believe that intelligence is static. And I must look clever. They avoid, therefore, challenges. They will give up easily because they'll see the effort as pointless. And they'll also ignore useful criticism because it's too hard for them to take, no matter how constructive. So these are the individuals who are likely to plateau earlier and achieve less than their full potential. Okay, a growth mindset believes that intelligence is expandable. We can develop it. I want to learn more, therefore, is the message that I say to myself, and I really believe. And I will embrace challenges and things that I perceive to be tricky or difficult because I want to have a go. I will persist. I'll show that true grit even when things go wrong or they're really challenging to me. And what I will perceive is that effort has got to be the way forward. I put the effort in, I put the hard work in, and I will be able to achieve this. And I also do not fear criticism. I'll be able to take constructive criticism and be able to learn from the mistakes that I make. So that enables me to reach my real full potential, in my view, and also higher levels of achievement overall. So the characteristics of a fixed mindset and the repercussions are pretty clear here, I think. If we're saying to ourselves, my intelligence is a fixed trait, I have a certain amount of it and that's it, then what I'm going to do, the repercussions of that is that I'll be worrying about this and thinking I don't have enough, that I really have to look clever all the time, I mustn't look stupid. I feel cleverer when things are easy, when I put in little effort and I outperform my peers. And very, very often perfectionists are like this. They won't actually take a challenge because they're so worried about making a mistake. And again, this is really, really difficult because it stops you from actually putting the effort in. And I'm worried all the time, obviously, that my intelligence will be called into question by those who I perceive to be cleverer than me. I need easy successes to feel clever. Okay, so that means that any challenge I won't engage with because it will be a threat to my self-esteem. I don't want to have my inadequacies or errors revealed. I can't show that I've got something wrong. And what that does is that makes me withdraw from something that could be a really valuable learning opportunity. And even if I'm doing well at something at the beginning, I won't be able to cope with a problem or an obstacle. So therefore, I will disengage with the task as soon as the going seems to get a wee bit tough. So the characteristics of a growth mindset, which is clearly what we want for all our children, is I know that intelligence is something I can increase through my own efforts. So therefore I will want to work hard and learn as much as I possibly can. I won't be frightened to do that. I know that there are differences between people in how much they know and how quickly they master things, but that's not going to bother me because I think that all of us, if we really put the effort in, will get there. We might get there at different times, but we will all get there in the end. I love to learn new things, so therefore I will sacrifice opportunities to look clever in favour of opportunities to learn something new. It doesn't matter if I actually fail in front of other people. I'm excited by challenges, so I'll just chuck myself into that difficult task and I'll set goals. I'll be realistic about them, but I will set goals and make sure I've got the strategies and capacities to reach them. I feel clever when I'm really fully engaged with a new task. Again, this is this concept of flow, and I will be talking about flow in another session when we engage with positive psychology approaches. So I will stretch myself and I'll put my knowledge to good use. I don't mind transferring it into new situations and contexts. So I'll get it done and I'll really succeed. So how are these mindsets created? You learn that so quickly. You're so clever. What does the child hear? If I don't learn something quickly, I'm not clever. You're just brilliant. You got an A and you didn't even study for it. What does the child hear? I better stop studying or they won't think I'm brilliant anymore. Look at that drawing. Isn't he the next Picasso or what? He's so brilliant at it. What does the child hear? I shouldn't try drawing anything hard or they see that I'm not that good. Really? And these are the fixed mindset labels that are just simply not helpful. Oh, he's so smart. She's so cute. It's great, fast, he's the best, she's so pretty, he's so well behaved, she's just amazing, he's simply the best, or he's so much better than so-and-so. The good news is, as we know, mindsets can be changed. We can do this as we build resilience in our children and young people. And this is that university capacity, that universal capacity that allows a person, a group or a community to prevent, minimise or overcome the damaging effects of adversity. How pertinent at this time, going back into school after lockdown. This is really, really important to remember. We can learn to be more resilient. We can learn to have and use more authentic levels of self-esteem and develop the growth mindset that we need. In developing this growth mindset, Carol Dweck suggests that we can model it for our children and young people and for ourselves, okay, in a 4-step plan. So step 1, learning to hear your fixed mindset voice. And this is exactly the same for me as using CBT strategies where I'm saying, is that a negative automatic thought, and challenging it at the outset, not actually accepting it as the reality and actually looking for the evidence against it. So learn how to hear your fixed mindset voice. Recognize that you have a choice here. Step 3, talk back to it with a growth mindset voice. So again, this is about re-evaluating, reframing, cognitive reframing again here. And take the growth mindset action is step 4. So choose the alternative path. Praise is not a villain. That's not what I'm saying here. And it's certainly not what Carol Dweck is asserting through her work. Okay, it's fine. We need to feel valued, appreciated, loved, supported, etc. We need to feel that we are, but it has to be authentic praise. Okay, so isn't that a beautiful, wonderful drawing? You are such a great artist. You are certainly going to be the next Picasso. It's about saying, oh, that looks really interesting. Tell me about why you chose to design it like that. Tell me about the colours that you chose there. Carol Dweck talks about process praise, and this is what I think we need to engage in now, and make sure that we use all the time with our children and young people. So praising effort, perseverance, the true grit, motivation, and the strategies that the child is using. Okay, that picture has so many beautiful colours. Tell me about them. You can use this mistake. Think about why it didn't work and learn from it. Ultimately, our language tells children what we believe and what we value. Pause for a minute and just think about that fact. Carol Dweck says if parents want to give their children a gift, the best way they can do it is to teach their children to love challenges, to be intrigued by mistakes, enjoy effort and keep on learning. That way their children don't have to be slaves to praise. They will have a lifelong way to build up and repair their own confidence and ultimately, in my view, protect their self-esteem. And the focus on embracing mistakes and learning from them is something else that she really, really emphasises. And thinking about challenges and mistakes and struggles as something that are valuable to us. So, that was a fantastic struggle. You really stuck to it and made great progress. This will take a lot of effort, but it will be such fun. Curiosity is a great talent for us to have as adults when we're working with children and young people, as opposed to the praise that is inauthentic. This is really, really helpful. So just tell me about it. Show me more. How did you do it? How did you figure it out? Okay, are you pleased with it? What do you think will happen if? And observing comment. So this kind of narrative that's going along alongside the child, that commentary. You did it. You put your own shoes on. Oh, those clouds are really big. They look great, don't they? Isn't that interesting? Why have you done them that size? That's interesting. You've added lots of detail to the faces. That's looking really, really like that person. Isn't that amazing? Okay. And encouraging positive self-talk is really, really important. Not unrealistic again, positive. So one of the key mantras here is the phrase I use all the time and want kids to use: I can't do it yet. And Carol Dweck also focuses on teaching children about the neuroscience here. Okay, so I think this is really, really important. Brainology, and I'm just going to refer to that in the next slide too. Showing children and young people how brain cells connect and how they further develop and how they can grow and can be developed like a muscle is really, really powerful. And there's so much stuff out on YouTube in particular. So if you look at the Clever Cabbies clip on YouTube or watching brain cells connecting, really make use of these with children. And the Clever Cabbies, of course, is really, really interesting because it's all about how cabbies in London learn the knowledge and the difference that makes in terms of their brain capacity and development and the fact that their brains do grow. And it's a really, really powerful message to give to children. So we can grow our brains. Brainology. Do some more research. You'll need to investigate this further, obviously, but I think it's really, really important to do so. Also giving children and young people a range of examples of effort, perseverance, and how people cope and manage with setbacks. And there are some lovely printable posters from the TES YouTube Famous Failures. So have a look at that. Also, just think about specific ones that you would think impact really positively on children and young people. So follow something that is following their interest as well. So for example, David Beckham saying, my secret is practice. I've always believed that if you want to achieve anything special in life, you've got to work, and then work some more. That lovely 4-letter word, I love it. Nothing better. If nothing that we achieve in essence is of any real value unless we've put lots and lots of effort into it. We have to work hard at it. And everyone I know who's creative or successful in their field, in terms of art, in terms of literature, whatever it is, they have worked so hard to get there. And children need to hear this message. So just returning to this born smart issue or topic, mindsets have a significant impact on motivation and performance. We know this, and we know that beliefs can be changed, which is in essence the rationale for us adopting growth mindset and teaching it in schools. So as we draw to a close in this CPD Coffee Time session, I'm just going to go over 14 ways to enhance your self-esteem and that of your children. And these are really the old chestnuts. I love them. Okay, spending time with people who like you and care about you, clearly. Ignore and stay away from people who put you down or treat you badly. Much harder for children, but an absolute essential if we want to protect the self-esteem we have and further develop it. Do things you enjoy that make you feel good, and do things that you're good at and get better at them. Don't be frightened to reward yourself for your successes and develop the talents that you have. Be your own best friend. Treat yourself well and do things that are good for you. Don't do things that are bad for you. Do things that make you feel good spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally. Make choices for yourself. Be autonomous. Don't let other people take control. And take responsibility for yourself, the choices that you make and your actions. Always do what you believe is right. This will protect your self-esteem. Be true to yourself in the values that you hold and respect other people and treat them right. If you don't do that, then that will clearly impact negatively on your own self-esteem. Set goals, realistic, achievable goals, and work to achieve them. Do it step by step and keep working on that growth mindset. This is a lifelong journey for all of us, I think. And it's something like resilience that we need to build continually in our life. So we need to actually use the strategies, use the tools so that we can continue to do this. The slides I've developed here today, you will find nearly everything I've said in this essential resilience and wellbeing toolkit for early years. So take a look at it because I think it's really, really helpful, useful publication to get hold of. And there are so many ideas. It's jam-packed full of them and things that you can actually use with children and young people. As you can actually print stuff off, which I think is obviously also really essential in this time when we've got to be very careful about hygiene. So lots of photocopyables in that resource. And again, the Wellbeing Toolkit for Mental Health Leads. This is such a comprehensive training resource. Please do take a look because, of course, much of what I've said in this session today, you will find in many of these modules in terms of actually supporting children and young people overall with their mental health and well-being. So thank you again for listening and making use of this CPD session. I hope it's been helpful and I hope that you can take away some key messages about self-esteem and growth mindset, and that you can actually maybe think about 2 or 3 things you can do as a direct result of this session. Just write them down, record them, things that you might do differently in your interactions, in the narratives that you develop with children and young people, and perhaps also in the narratives that you use with yourself, what you're thinking about yourself and how you're developing and maintaining your own self-esteem, levels of confidence and well-being. So I will be doing many more of these sessions. I am so passionate about this. I think it's so essential that at this time we can give each other as much support as we possibly can in terms of maintaining well-being and supporting each other to navigate this new so-called normal. So thanks again, and hopefully you'll join me next time.